If you're thinking about living full-time outside of the country and just traveling full-time or slow traveling, then this video is going to be for you. Today I'm going to share the pros and the cons that we have experienced, my husband and I, of living full-time outside of the country. So if that's something that you're dreaming about and that's the reason why you clicked on this video, make sure you hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Welcome back to Beyond Travel Check-ins with Saida and sometimes Jermaine. Today I want to talk to you about the pros and the cons of traveling full-time. Jermaine and I have been traveling full-time for 9 months now, and we absolutely love it. But there are some things that we don't love. So today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down those pros and cons. The number one pro that I have experienced with living full-time outside of the country is freedom. When I made the decision to live outside of the country, one of the things I was looking for was travel freedom, financial freedom, time freedom. Jermaine and I were both self-employed, so we kind of made our own schedules. We kind of decided when we wanted to work or when we needed to work and when we didn't. And so we had that freedom there. We were already building that up before we decided to move here. But now that we're here and we've actually pivoted in what we do for a living, we really have a lot more freedom. Freedom with our time because we set our own schedules. We don't have a boss. We don't have to punch a clock. And so that has been that's one of the things that I think a lot of people look for when they're looking to move outside of the country. They want that freedom and that flexibility. But then there's also a con to that, and that is the uncertainty. So when you're living outside of the country and you're not a resident of a country, there's going to be this constant uncertainty. What happens is you're always planning the next move. Unless you're a resident of a country, and if you're like us, you have your base in one country, but you still travel around to other countries, there's always this constant uncertainty about, okay, when my ETA expires or when my visa expires, what am I going to do then? Where am I going to be then? So those are some of the things that we are constantly thinking about. But what Jermaine and I do is we actually just plan ahead. We plan out the whole year ahead. We figure out, okay, where are we going to be for this amount of time? Where are we going to go after that? Then what are we going to do? So we kind of plan out that stuff in advance, and we go ahead and book tickets. We map out our ETAs, visas, all those different kinds of things, and we just move around. So, but that could definitely be a con to someone because you feel like you're not settled at times. But a pro is going to be cultural immersion. So while you're moving around to different places, you are experiencing different cultures. So when it comes to cultural immersion, when you're traveling around to different countries, you're actually getting a chance to see what that country is really like versus what you're reading about on the internet. Because there were certain things that we thought about Kenya, there were certain things that we thought about Dubai that we realized wasn't actually fact. And so being in the country, visiting, staying for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, you do get to really see what the culture is like. You can try food that's on the touristy end. You can try food that is on the local end. You get to meet local people. You get to go and eat at the homes of local people as you make friends in these different places. So that's one of the good parts. And you also, if you're staying in a specific place for a long time, like for Jermaine and I, Kenya is our home base, learning the language is definitely a way to immerse yourself in the culture as well as learning the customs and learning to eat the different foods that are in those countries. One of the cons of traveling and living full-time is the physical and the mental exhaustion. So Jermaine and I, we live here in Nairobi, Kenya, but we travel outside of Nairobi, we travel outside of Kenya, and sometimes when all of that traveling, sometimes it can just really begin to bog you down and make you tired if you don't plan well. And especially if your landing pad is not set up to where when you come back, you can just ease back into life and get back into the day-to-day routine. And so that can be one thing that can bring on a little bit of stress when you're constantly traveling. I know you watch travel bloggers or travel vloggers and you see them going from here to there to everywhere, but what you don't see is them constantly packing and unpacking, moving things from here to there, trying to figure out storage, trying to figure out where their things are going to be. sitting in the airport for long periods of time. So those are some of the things that you have to think about, because constantly picking up this heavy suitcase or that heavy suitcase, it can lead to physical exhaustion, and then just all the going all the time can lead to mental exhaustion. So travel burnout is a real thing. If you say, okay, I'm going to be a full-time traveler, and you want to be somewhere different every month or every 2 months, you do have to understand that there's a lot of packing and unpacking that goes into it, and it can lead to like physical stress or physical exhaustion or mental exhaustion as well. So another pro that Jermaine and I are actually cultivating right now is a life of minimalism. Now, we're not minimalist by any stretch of the imagination, but since downsizing and selling everything in our home and then moving here, we have learned to live on less. It's been an adventure, but it's also been something that we've had to adjust to. So even like with our kitchen setup, just being able to adjust with not having all of the kitchen items that we would typically have in terms of appliances and all those things. You have to get used to that, but the pro to that is that you have less things to worry about. So even like when we're packing up to move somewhere else, it's like we know how much stuff we're going to be packing up. It's not like a whole bunch of things, and it allows you to really more focus on your life's experiences than managing a bunch of things. So that's one of the things that we actually enjoy about the way we live, having like where we don't have an apartment that we had to furnish. Like our apartment is just already furnished, everything is here. So when we decide to leave, we don't have to move anything to storage except for our like minimal items that we own. So we're learning like a lot of life lessons and learning how to be minimalist at the same time. So one of the cons of full-time travel is going to be financial instability. And while Jermaine and I have not experienced that, I can definitely see how that could be a thing. The reason why is because sometimes with these YouTube videos, guys, like people are out here lying about what it actually costs to live in places. So sometimes you have to actually go and see what it's like. And also, sometimes when people are telling you different prices and rates for things, you have to understand that everybody has like different expectations in food, accommodations, social activities, and those sorts of things. So those are things that you're going to kind of learn when you're more on the ground versus like really being able to grasp that from a YouTube video. So one of the things that you do want to keep in mind is that it may be a challenge budgeting at first, because even like for Jermaine and I, when we moved to here to Nairobi, Kenya, we realized that it costs more to live here than what was being shown on YouTube. And it worked out for us because it wasn't that big of a stretch. But I could imagine like somebody coming here and thinking they're going to live here or live somewhere else for a set amount of money, but then finding out it's a little bit more than what they anticipated. But then you have also unexpected costs, emergencies, visas, ETAs, emergency flights, those kinds of things. So you want to take those things into consideration. And those things can also work against you when you're trying to travel full time, especially if you have a tight budget or if you do not have any kind of emergency money on the side for unexpected expenses. So the next pro on the list is going to be, and this is one of my favorite, is a new adventure regularly. It's fun because every day we can get up and say, okay, is there a restaurant we want to try? Is there a new activity around town we want to try? Whether it's hiking or whether it's some type of like adventure park or activity. Is there a resort we want to check out? So there's a lot of things. There's beaches. There's so many beaches around here over in the coast. So that's one of the things when you get to a new country is exciting because everything is new. Even if you go and you just eat street food for the day, that's going to be an adventure. And so it kind of keeps you from getting stuck in a rut. Like when you're in your day-to-day life, you know, you're getting up, you're going to work, you feed the kids, you're doing all these things. And you do have some sense of structure, but it's much more of an adventure because there are so many just different things you can do. Like Jermaine and I have done so many new things since we have been living abroad that we haven't gotten bored yet. Next on the list for cons is going to be sometimes may get a sense that you don't feel like you have a sense of home. And that's just a very real feeling. And I think that's the case whether you purchase an apartment. I know a lot of full-time travelers live in Airbnbs, they live in hotels, they'll rent an apartment, and a lot of times it's hard to feel like that's home sometimes, especially like even if you rent an apartment and you rent an apartment like long term, until you've lived there long term, it's not going to feel like home. And so especially if you move around a lot, if you travel every 3 months or you travel every 6 months from whatever international country you're living in, you just don't feel like you have a sense of home. It's like it feels like you're almost on vacation all the time. And while I know that people look at that as a perk, it can get tiring and tiresome over time. So just keep that in mind. If you're the kind of person that you just need a sense of stability, there's not a lot of stability in this kind of life. And by that I mean, like even Jermaine and I, we've been living here 9 months, but we've left here probably 4 times in those 9 months. So that's what I mean when I say there's no sense of stability, because as your visa runs out, you do have to leave, you do have to pack up, or if you have an apartment, you can leave your things there. But you're always kind of living out of a suitcase. And I say that very loosely because Jermaine and I don't live out of a suitcase. When we get here, when we get home, we unpack, and we're here, we know, for either 3 months or for 6 months. And then towards the end of our 3 months or end of our 6 months, we do start packing up our stuff and we put our stuff in storage. And that's just for us because we choose not to rent a long-term apartment, sign a long-term lease. If you sign a long-term lease, then you won't have the feeling of living out of a suitcase when you're in the country. But what about when you leave? Then you are living out of a suitcase. So it doesn't matter whether you get a long-term rental in the country that you live in or you live like we live, you will still have that feeling of living outside of a suitcase, because even when you go to the next place to exercise that visa time frame that you have to leave before you can come back to a country, you'll be living outside of a suitcase. So you got to keep that in mind, and it gives maybe sometimes a sense of instability. This is the last pro on the list. The pro is potential cost saving. So depending on where you're living in the US, if you move to another country, you can absolutely save money. However, Jermaine and I are not like saving any money by living here in Nairobi. But we're living here for a specific purpose. We didn't come here to live cheaper. I thought things would be less expensive here, but they're not. And you have to understand, even when you go to a lot of other countries, the prices of those countries that used to be cheaper are now beginning to creep up. And so you just want to kind of keep that in mind, that there are some pros, like there are some places you can live where you can pay a lower cost of living than what you're paying currently. However, Jermaine and I were living in a low cost of living state. So, you know, what it cost us to live before we moved here wasn't very high in the first place. So depending on where you're coming from, this can be a pro if you're living in a high cost of living area like Chicago, Phoenix, New York, California, any of those places, and then you move here. Yes, I think you will experience a reduction in your budget, maybe, because I know a lot of people do come out here and their food cost goes up because there's just so many places to eat, so people eat out a lot. There's so many social places to go. So people do go out a lot. So you may end up saving in one area and spending more in another area, but that can definitely be a pro depending on what you're currently paying in the US versus what you're paying in whatever country you decide to move to. So for us, we have no regrets. The pros outweigh the cons, and we wouldn't have it any other way. I prayed for this lifestyle for a couple of years now, and it took us some time to strategize and figure out how to make it a reality. But for those of you who are maybe thinking about doing it, it's important to know both sides before you actually jump in and make the decision, because it is a huge decision. So let me know in the comment section, would you ever want to live life as a full-time traveler? And if you like this video, make sure you give this video a thumbs up. Make sure you share this video with your friends. Make sure you hit the like button and drop any comments that you have down in the comment section below.